Our guest today is Tristram Riley-Smith. Tristram is a social anthropologist. He's worked in government for 30 years, and now he describes himself as a champion for a major UK security research programme. Tristram, what does a champion do?
Well, a champion is a go-between, first and foremost. He's also an ambassador. And the reason I'm here at the Emergency Planning College is indeed to partly do that ambassadorial role. It's about promoting the value of what is a massive reservoir of research existing within the United Kingdom that I think could be of value to your constituents.
Research in which fields?
It's a huge range. It's fundamentally research into understanding and countering threats to our security, our well-being, and there are 6 primary themes, with a 7th that's about to emerge over the horizon: terrorism, cybersecurity, transnational organised crime, threats to critical infrastructure, ideologies and beliefs where those lead to extremism, and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their materials: chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear. And the 7th, as if that lot wasn't enough, is conflict and conflict resolution, war and peace.
And in the past, this has been known as the Global Uncertainties Programme, but it's got a fancy new name now, is that right?
Well, it's behaving a bit like Prince, and it's now the artist formerly known as. It's the artist formerly known as the Global Uncertainties Programme, but because that doesn't really tell you what's inside the tin, there's now a move to changing the name to talk about that partnership for conflict, crime and security research.
How important is this research programme to the UK?
I think it's of great importance, and you get a sense of that by just looking at its stature. It's a 10-year programme. Every research council is involved, ranging from the Science and Technology Facilities Council through to the Economic and Social Research Council, with engineering and physical sciences thrown in, etc. We're halfway through that programme. Actually, we're into year 6 now. There are 1,200 projects and £400 million worth of grants have been spent so far, and another 4 years to go.
How effective is the relationship between the research community and the practitioners, the people who are in the front line, if you like, in terms of risk and resilience in the UK?
All needs to be done to improve it, which is why my role's been created. As I say, I came in halfway through the programme. I'm a year into that, and in this role as ambassador and intermediary, I'm really there to try to draw those two sides together, to get knowledge exchange flowing between them, and to get both sides to recognise that there's real benefit and merit from talking to one another, engaging with one another, and extracting the tremendous value that's to be found inside our research programme, extracting that out into society. And if I could just sort of define the 2 major sorts of impact which I'm concerned with, and fundamentally I'm in my job because I'm there to deliver impact. For me, there's 2 sorts of impact. There's intellectual, and that's where decision makers or policy makers are reaching their judgments in a sort of world which has been illuminated by insights that learning and research has to offer. And there's instrumental, operational, and that's where you're getting new tools and techniques out there in the real world, making a difference, making the world a safer place. And I would imagine principally your representatives, your interest group within the Emergency Planning College is going to be concerned with what instruments are out there, new sensors to detect.
Well, I mean, okay, let me take you up on that then. You sell me now some of ideas that are coming out of this instrumental research, if you like.
Well, the examples of that are around some exciting new sensors that are being developed. So to give you one example, out of Cardiff University, research has been done to detect nerve agents and chemical agents easily, cheaply, with a very low error rate. That research had been funded, interestingly, by DSTL, the Defence Science and Technology Labs. It has actually been tested down in Porton Down. It's been proved to be effective. And what you have now is an academic team at Cardiff who are really keen to find people who can actually help them now to implement that. A fantastic sensor. Further down the road, Liverpool University is developing what is probably going to be a revolutionary new gamma ray detector to pick up radioactive material. This might be of greater relevance to airport security, but I can certainly see it of being of value to, say, the blue light services if there was some risk of a dirty bomb going off. What this will do, which no instrument has been able to do before, is not only tell you specifically, locate specifically where the radiation is, rather than just telling you it's out there somewhere, but it also will tell you what specific material is radiating, and that could be potentially really exciting. So two simple examples there.
But the fact that you've been appointed to champion this research within our community, if you like, does this mean that there's been a failure in the past to communicate that perhaps researchers have been working in a vacuum?
The bottom line is that there is failure, dare I use that word, there is inadequate communication, and blame falls on both sides. The bottom line is that busy stakeholders, whether they're working on emergency services, whether they're policymakers in Whitehall, are incredibly busy, their noses against the coalface. It's darn difficult to grab their attention and suggest to them there could be something that's going to help them to make their job better. Equally, researchers get very excited about the detail of their research, and I'll be frank with you, they are not always very good communicators. One of the tasks, one of the missions I've got when I'm reaching out and connecting with those researchers is actually to help them deliver some simple, clear, stark messages which are going to grab the attention of the stakeholder. If I fail to do that, they're not going to get the impact that they want to deliver.
And looking at it from
of the stakeholder. If I fail to do that, they're not going to get the impact that they want to deliver.
And looking at it from the stakeholder's point of view, the end user, how can they take advantage of this fantastic research capacity when they simply don't know about it?
Well, again, one of the roles that I have to perform is to knock on their door periodically and tell them that it's happening. That's why I'm coming to this stage. They are very receptive. I'm delighted and amazed at how receptive they are. The best example I could give, which is a very current one, is the National Crime Agency, the latest emanation of what was the Serious Organised Crime Agency, has invited me to send a researcher into the organisation to spend 3 months there, security cleared, to help them define their requirements for social and behavioural science research. A whole raft of relevant questions that would help them to do their job more effectively. Questions about how you communicate with victims, how you intervene with criminals, how you understand the nature of criminal markets, the nature of the dynamics of criminal organisations. But they've never sat down and spelt that out. This is going to allow us to actually start giving the research community some really meaty and relevant questions to work on, which 3 or 4 years down the road will start bringing in benefits back into the National Crime Agency.
Are we good at this stuff? Are we good at this research?
Britain is phenomenally good at research. When you look at the statistics in terms of Nobel Prize winners, because there are some very deep and serious flaws in our culture when it comes to actually going to the next stage. This is exemplified for me in the way in which we fail to take advantage, commercial advantage, of the intellectual property that's developed in our universities. America is far better at it. They have venture capital funds and venture capitalists who are prepared to take greater risks, to reach down, connect with the professors and turn their ideas into clever commercial products. The professors themselves are very willing to go and do that. I think we fail to deliver in that respect. A perfect example is to look at the opportunity costs for a venture capital fund. It could invest £10 million in a low-risk management buy-in, or it could invest just £1 million in a high-risk piece of new science. The opportunity cost is the same. We shouldn't be surprised that they decide to go for the former, leaving the latter to rot in the ground, and we need to do something about that.
And that in part is your job.
One of the things I'm doing is creating a new marketplace where academics can start grabbing the attention of people in industry, of investors. Clearly, if I've got stakeholders from government, stakeholders from civil society interested as well, we're then beginning to get the investors to recognise, hey, there's a market here, we can invest.
Can we just lift our sights for a moment? This programme was called, it's still called for the time being, the Global Uncertainties Programme. How uncertain a world do you think we live in?
It is an uncertain world. It probably is more uncertain than it was 10 or 15 years ago when we had the certainties of the Cold War. And that uncertainty is stemming from a raft of different factors. My own view is that climate change is going to be exerting all sorts of pressures on populations around the world. When you combine that with water supply, food supply, growing populations, massive urbanization, we're going to be seeing all sorts of stress and strain, and we're beginning to see some evidence of that now. I think we're seeing it in what I believe to be a sort of new 30 years war that Shiites and Sunnis are fighting in the Middle East. We're seeing all sorts of stress and strain emanating as the sort of Russian post-imperialism is leading to that country to sort of flex its muscles and try to struggle with its identity and the identity of its sort of diaspora, its expatriate community in places like Ukraine. And obviously we're also seeing the rise of new powers, India and most obviously China, and the way that country is seeking in a sense to recreate the empires of the past. And that puts all sorts of pressures and stresses and strains on the world. So it ain't getting any easier right now.
And one can see the role that scientific research can have when you're considering the consequences of climate change. Not so straightforward when you're looking at those sort of big geopolitical issues you're talking about, China, Russia. How can science help that?
Just remember, science isn't just about gizmos and tools. It's also about insights. Political science can help us to understand the dynamics of tribes, of societies, of ethnic groups. Here's the anthropologist speaking. Science is obviously also going to help, social and behavioural science is also going to help us to think about how you get involved in negotiating away potential conflict. One of the challenges of my programme is to think about how you can suppress potential conflict so it doesn't turn out into a real hot war with large numbers of people are dying. And there are things we can learn from the research that's being done into social and behavioural science in those areas. And if, heaven forfend, but if we do end up in some sort of a war, whether it's an asymmetric warfare with terrorists setting off bombs, potentially even dirty bombs, or if it's a war between equals, we're going to be needing to have the tools and techniques to make our citizens as safe as they possibly can be. Whether it's the tools and techniques that are going to detect the homemade explosives being smuggled onto the plane, or some of those tools that I described to you earlier, which after the event, emergency response teams are going to be using to make themselves safer so they can then go in and mop up after the event.
So this programme really is tackling some of the big questions of our day and coming up with practical solutions.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for asking me.